Hello everybody, welcome to the third session on how to build a time tracker application with ReExt. I am Andres Villalba, I'm a sales engineer at Sencha, and today I will be your guide. Before we start, I want to remind you that we have a YouTube channel where you can find more information about ReExt, about XJS, and you can also watch the previous sessions of this series. Today, it is the third session, meaning that we have already looked at how to install and create your first application with ReExt during session 1, and we have also taken a look at different components by using ReExt on session 2. Today we will be building our navigation, and on the next session we will be creating our login form. After that, we're going to be doing a few more things like creating the main part of the application, meaning our admin grid and our user grid. Today, the way we're gonna create our navigation is by using a tab panel. So we're gonna be taking a look at different panels. These are usually the containers for all our components in XJS and ReExt. So we're gonna cover the basic panel, which we have already talked a little bit about. Then we're gonna move on to the card panel, the tab panel, and we have some time, we might take a look at a few others. After we're done with this explanation, we're going to move on to creating the navigation for the time tracker by using a tab panel. I want to share with you a few useful links. If you want to look at our components either in Next.js or ReExt, those first two links will take you to our demos. Remember that all XJS components are compatible with ReExt. So even if you don't see a component in our ReExt demo site, they are available for you. Then what I'm sharing is the documentation, the Sencha docs. And finally, if you don't have ReExt, you may get it from sencha.com. So without further ado, let's start with our examples. Okay, so I have already created my own project. I used Vite to create this project, which created the basic files that I need. Remember that it creates an app.jsx file that has an example. I got rid of most of it and just left the div container there. And also you will get the main JSX file, which is basically where you set everything up. For now, all I did is that I set up a theme, then I selected that I wanted Font Awesome to be included to use icons. And also I made sure my location was local since I have a commercial license and I have it installed inside my public folder. And then after doing that, I also created a navigation file inside source view main. This is empty for now. All it has is a basic message that says hello. So if we want to test this, I have to call that navigation component. And by doing that, all I will have for now, just a basic window that says hello. Okay, now we don't want this. We want to be learning how to create panels. So I'm going to be doing all that inside of the navigation panel. So let me take that out and I'm going to be using a ReExt component. If you remember, what I have to specify is the X type. In this case, is going to be panel. I have to specify the config, and if I need, I can also specify the style. So I'm going to be using both for now. The style, I'm going to say that it has a width of 100% and a height on 100 VH. Also inside the config, I'm gonna give it a title. I'm gonna call it time tracker application. And let's put some text inside of it. Say hello world. And this is just a basic panel. It doesn't have much. It just looks like this, meaning we have a title and some text. But if we want to create our application, we have to put something else inside. Remember that any ReExt component can have just HTML, or it can have items, and those items will be sub-components. So if I want to divide this main panel into sub-panels, I can create a few more. So I'm creating the first panel. I'm gonna give it a title of example 1. Let's put some HTML there. And I'm gonna copy and paste and call that example 2. This will kind of work. I have my title and I have those two panels, but they're not measuring the full height. So For that, I need to specify a layout. So I'm gonna add layout here. And remember what we need inside a layout, it's the type. In this case, I'm gonna call it VBox. And it is also a good idea to include an align property. I'm gonna call it stretch. Apart from that, I'm also gonna give it a flex value to each of its columns. Remember, you can also use height or width. In this case, I am using a flex value so that the panels do share the 50% of the screen, of the available space to be precise. So for example, I can do it that way, and now it's 33% and 66, or I can enter the actual height in pixels if I want to. Now the first panel has a fixed height and the other one changes as required. And remember that last time we talked about layout types. If I use an H box instead of a V box, now we'll have one panel besides the other. And if I do that, of course, this shouldn't be height, it should be width. And now that's working. So that's the way we build a basic panel. If we want to do something else, we want to create a card layout, we will have to change this a little bit. But before I continue with that, there's something I want to remind you too, which is if you don't want to do subpanels this way, because we're using XJS to create the subpanels, instead we can create an open and a close tag for our ReExt component, and we can include those sub panels as also ReExt components. So let's say X type. I'm gonna call this one panel 2. I'm gonna give it a style, and I'm also going to specify its config. So here I will set up the title, say example 1, and then after this I'm gonna add some HTML, say hello. Let's copy and paste this exact component so that we can create the second one, which is gonna be example 2. I'm gonna say goodbye. And if we do it this way, we have to specify the width or the height depending on the type of layout we have. So I'm gonna say flex 1, flex 2, and we also must specify that this component it's a child so that it knows that it will behave as a child to the main panel. If we do those things, now we have our working panels, and we can add as many as we want. And we can also have one of those panels with sub panels. For example, just gonna do it this way, items. So the right panel now it will have its own sub panels. So let's say title sample 3, give it a flex value, and let's create the last one, which I will call example 4. And of course, if I do it this way, I must also specify the layout. So let me just copy the one I used before. So this panel on the right will have these two sub panels. So I need to give it a layout, and let's create it as a box. And as you can see, now I have my main left panel, and then I have a right panel that has two sub panels. Okay. If you don't want a title to show up, just get rid of it. Of course, you can hide it, but it'll be easier to just get rid of it. So I have a one panel, and the second panel has those two inside of it. Okay, so that's a way we can create panels. We can create our own React component to create our panels, which I will be doing later with our navigation panel, with our tab panel in specific. But for now, this is an idea on how to create just basic panels. Okay, to create a card layout, it's quite simple. We already have this panel, so all I'm going to do is change to card. That's it to create it. The only problem is that we won't be able to navigate through it. So right now I'm just looking at the first card. How can I navigate? Well, I need to reference the layout and indicate to ReExt which card I need to load or I want to load. So for that, I'm going to create a toolbar on this main panel. There are different ways to create toolbars. We can use VBar to create a bottom toolbar, T-bar to create a top toolbar, or just buttons to create also a toolbar at the bottom of the screen. The only difference is in a V bar or in a T bar, you can put whatever element you want. In buttons, what it's going to be doing, it's only creating buttons. So instead, I think I'm just gonna use V bar since it's more flexible. Since I'm using V bar, I have to specify the X type. I create a button, gonna give it some text at next page, and I can add an icon or different options. But for now, I'm gonna create a handler. Remember that last time I showed you that you can create a handler that reference a method created with React, but for now I'm just gonna do it right there, okay? And of course, if I'm gonna have a next page, I'm going to also use a button to call the previous page. So let's do it that way. It's basically going to do the same thing, but one it's going to load the previous and the other one the following. Okay, now let's continue by creating the actual method. What I'm going to do is get the panel. Since I am inside the button, if I type this, what I'm gonna be getting it's the actual button. If I want to get the panel, the container panel, I have to use either an ID, an item ID, or a reference, or I can use the navigation functions inside XJS or ReExt. This time I'm gonna be using them. So if I say this up, this is going to get the object that contains this button, meaning it will get the toolbar. If I say up twice, this is going to get now the panel. But this is gonna get a little bit confusing, so the best idea is to do a lookup. So instead of just saying up, I'm gonna say up panel. What this is gonna be doing, it's looking for the container that it's a panel. So it's gonna check the toolbar. It's a panel. No, it'll go further up. This is a panel. Yes, that's the object it will get. So I'm gonna save this as main panel. I can do everything in one line, but it'll be easier for me to separate it into different variables to explain it. So now I have to get the layout. The active panel is saved inside the layout, so I need it right now. So I'm just gonna say main panel, get layout, okay? Now, if I want to get the current sub panel, the one that is active, I'm just gonna say active panel equals layout active item. It is that straightforward. It might sound a little bit confusing, but that's getting me the current panel. So if what I want to do is activate the previous one, and now I'm gonna get the previous panel and save it in that variable. So to do this, I'll get the active panel and just get the previous style. Okay, so far so good, right? Like I said, I could have taken everything inside of this and put it everything in one line, getting the panel. Now I have to tell the layout that the current item is actually previous panel. But there's a catch, of course. If previous panel is undefined or null, I shouldn't be doing this because that's gonna make my project fail. So instead, it's gonna say previous panel, it's not null, change to the previous one. Gonna copy this, paste it over here, and instead of previous panel, it's gonna be next. So next panel, next panel, next panel, and this is going to be next styling. Okay. Of course, I could have created a method and just call that maybe with a one and a -1, and this depending on that, calling the previous or the next panel. But let's go ahead and test this out and see if this is working. So as you can see, I'm looking at the first panel over here. I have the two buttons. Let's click on next. I switch to the other one. And if I click extra times, nothing happens. Okay, so that's it. That's how it works. And that's how we work with a card panel. Okay, what else? Okay, so that's as simple as it gets for a card panel. If we don't want to use a card panel, we can move on to the actual tab panel that we will be covering today. But before I do that, let me just remind you that if you go into the kitchen sink, you can also look at our border layout. And this one is quite interesting because this one creates up to 5 regions. Your main region or your center region, your west, south, east, and north regions. And it allows you to put this button to hide any of the regions. So this makes it quite interesting. And we will be using this layout later. So we have seen the basic panel, we have taken a look at the card panel, and now let's continue with our tab panel. Okay, so to continue with the tab panel, I'm gonna get rid of everything that I did here. Let's get that out. Let's get this out too. And as you can see, well, now I have just a basic panel, and that's all I have for now. So if I want to create a tab panel, instead of using the X type panel, I will use tab panel as its name states. And I can create the items, the sub panels inside of the ReExt, as just as I explained before, as items that will work fine. Or I can create them as their own ReExt components. So this depends on how you like to work. Either way will work fine. For now, I will do it this way, and then I will take the sections out of here and put them in their own folder. That will make more sense when I want to create my own application. So for now, I have ReExt, Xtype. This is going to be a panel. This is the actual sub panel. Since this is a sub panel, I have to specify the title. This is something we haven't done before, but by specifying the title here, I will give the text that it's going to be on the actual tab. So this is going to be called dashboard. Okay, then it can have its own config, which I will leave empty for now. I will create another ReExt component. I will call this one time tracker. This is where I will get to assign the tasks to the actual users. And last but not least, at least for now, I'm going to be creating the user time tracker. And this is where the users will get to track their own tasks. Okay, sounds easy, but we're not done. There are a few more things that we have to do there. For instance, I need to put some text inside so that I can see what's going on. And I also need to create a title for the inside of that tab panel. So I'm going to call this time admin time tracker. Notice that doesn't have to be the same title. And on the other one, I'm gonna call it my time tracker. Okay, this is just to show you that it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. Exactly the same. This is just an example. Okay, we're not done, but let me show you what we have because it will look like this. Have a dashboard, time tracker, user time tracker, but nothing shows up inside of them, of the different tabs. So what are we missing? Well, we're missing a few things. First, I don't think I will need the style, so I'm gonna take that out from the main tab panel. And also, and don't forget, I also need to add some contents into my dashboard. So let's call this dashboard. I'm just gonna say KPI, charts, and grids. And if we go and test, we get the first tab open, but the other two do not work. This has something to do with mixing XJS with React, but it's quite simple to solve. All we have to do is we have to use a hook. So I'm going to create a basic hook here, which is going to be called card and set card. and that's gonna be using the use state one. Okay, and on the main tab panel, what I will add there, it's a tab change, an event on tab change. And this one, it's going to capture the event when the tab is changed, and that's going to be calling the set card hook. So let's put here the parameters, which are tab panel, new card, and all card. And all we are going to be doing there is set card new and send the new card there. Okay, that's all we have to do. We try it out again. We can see that now it loads the correct section. Okay, we're not done. We're almost done with it. Uh, I'm going to add one more option. Right now, the menu is on the top. I'm gonna send it to the left, but if the design of the page is vertical, it's tall, meaning we're in a mobile device, then I'm gonna move the menu back to the top. So how do we do that? That is called responsive config, and it depends where that's going to happen. And in this case, it's gonna happen in the tab panel. So inside the config, I'm gonna add responsive config, and here I'm going to define what's gonna happen when the design is tall and when it is wide. So tab position, top, and when it's wide, I'm gonna call it tab position, left, and tab rotation 0. This is because the options are going to rotate. I'll show you in a few minutes. So let's refresh. That's when it's tall, and that's when it's wide. If I didn't add the tab rotation option there, what would happen is that tabs would look like this. If that's what you want, that's fine, but not in my case. Okay, all we're missing is how to separate this into different components, which we will be doing next. Okay, so next let's get ready to create all the other files. So inside view, I'm gonna create a folder for each group. So I'm gonna create one for the dashboard, another one for the grids, and let's say that later I want to create another section that it's called reports. So I'm having main, dashboard, grids, and reports. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take the dashboard as it is here. I'm gonna create then a new file to create the dashboard component. So I'm gonna create it there, same deal with each grid. So we mentioned that we're gonna have an admin grid. We are also going to have an user grid. And later when we create the reports, we will be creating a few more over there. So since we have other classes, we can use those ones to create the new one. So basically, I'm just gonna copy this part over here, and I'm gonna take that to our dashboard. That'll be faster than actually creating everything from scratch. So what's navigation gonna have inside? Well, basically, all I'm going to do is take that panel that I use for the dashboard. I'm gonna put it here. Okay. And the same thing for the other one. So I'm just gonna take this content, I'm gonna take it into the admin grid, and I'm gonna take it into the user grid. So this is gonna be called dashboard. The admin grid is going to be called admin grid. And finally, the user grid, it's going to be called, of course, user grid. And then I'm just gonna copy and paste what I had on each one. Finally, this one over here. Okay, so now I have three separate components, one for each section. And in the main navigation bar, what I'm gonna do here is actually load those components. So I'm gonna call the dashboard, then I'm gonna call the admin grid, and I'm gonna call the user grid. Something important though is that we have to add the title here instead of just doing it over here, but we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. If we test, it is working, but we don't see the options in the tab panel anymore. And that's because of what I was just mentioning. I have to include the title right here. And this title is the one that is going to be loaded into the tab panel options. So I'm just gonna say admin grid, and the user grid, like we said before, that's going to be called my grid or my tasks. Sorry. And here it is. Now, as you can see, we don't need that title there, not anymore. But if we wanted to keep the same title, we can use the props that we're receiving with the dashboard and maybe just put it here. Props.title, for example. And now, as you can see, we got each section working. And I'm going to take this one and put it here too. And same deal with that one. So now we got each section inside their own React component. So this will be easier to update. This will be easier to work with. And of course, like I was saying before, this is not the only way to do it. This is the simplest one. So now that we have everything set up, what we should do next is actually creating the login screen, which we will be doing on the next session. However, before doing that, just to have a better understanding of what we're doing up until this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create some real data inside of each section. So over here, I'm just gonna divide into four and put four different charts. Inside admin tasks, I'm just gonna put a grid, and I'm gonna put a copy of that grid inside my tasks. That way, we have a fully working example, even though the data will be fake, and you will be able to get a better idea of how this works. Okay, now I'm going to go into the dashboard and just create a couple of graphics there, a couple of charts. To do this, I'm gonna follow the example I created before, the one that we did on the previous session. But before doing that, I'm going to add an items array, and I am also going to put a layout here. So I'm gonna create four different subpanels, and I'm going to use what I already explained. So I'm gonna create a layout, and that layout, it's for now, it's going to be a VBox. So type VBox. I'm also going to say align stretch to make it measure the whole empty area. And then inside the items, I'm going to first create two panels. So let's say X type panel. Gonna put a title for now, although I'm gonna take it out. And then I'm gonna create the second panel, and I'm gonna put a different title there. And also we follow this as we did it before. I need to specify a flex value. Let's say this one is a flex of 1, and the other one has a flex value of 2. If we test this out, this is what we have right now inside our dashboard. Now what I'm going to do is divide the first panel into two columns and then divide the second one into two columns too. So that's why I'm going to take the title out. Now this one will have also its own items and its own layout. So I'm going to say type hbox in this case. I'm also going to say align stretch. And the items are also going to be a panel. I'm going to give it a flex value of 1. And I am going to give it a title also for now. I'm going to name that panel 1. And this one will have a second panel. And I'm going to give it a different title. Okay. Now, as you can see, this layout, everything that you see here will be taken into the next one, meaning I will take this and put it over here. There are some properties that are shared. For example, I have the X type, I have the layout. So if I want to simplify this, I can add a defaults property and inside of it put whatever is shared between those two. That way it will look a little bit simpler. Okay, and that's panel 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we test it out, this is what we have. I have 4 different panels. So they don't have to match in size. Let's say this one is 1 and 2, and this one is 3 and 1 for some reason. And now we have different panels with different sizes. I'm gonna take those titles out because these are supposed to be charts, and I'm just gonna leave the empty space for now. So I'm gonna take, like I said, the title out. Okay, so it's just going to look like this. Changing the design of our application, we can get rid of those lines, but for now I'm just gonna leave them there. And I'm gonna change the height to the same height for both of them. It'll make more sense. So it will look something like this. Okay, so I have a simplified version of the Cartesian chart that I created on the last session. So I'm just gonna put it here by copying and pasting. So instead of the actual panel, I have a Cartesian chart with the same flex value. Then I have the store with some basic data. We have the axis just like we did last time. Okay, and finally, what we have, it's the series type, which is bar. We got the X field country, we got two Y fields, and the colors we want to use. And that's basically it. Now that I have that, and I have also activated charts on my main file, we have to make sure that's the case. Okay, it should look something like this. Now let's say that we want the second chart to be something similar. Just gonna copy and paste again. But this time I'm gonna say that the charts are not stacked. If I did everything correctly, it will look something like this. Okay, so I just wanted to create a simple example so that you see how to populate your section. Once again, I am using XJS inside my ReExt component, but I could have separated everything into different components if I wanted to. And that's probably what we will be doing on the next sessions. But for now, I just did it this simple. Let's put over here, once again, that same Cartesian chart. Just gonna use some different colors. Let's say those are some shade of red. And at the end, same thing. Let's say those are greens. So even though all the charts have the same information, right now they look like this. Okay? And one cool thing is that since we're using flex values, charts will try to occupy the available space. Okay. And if we want to create an admin grid and my tasks grid, I'm gonna be doing that right now. So let's go into that admin grid. If you remember, we have something simple. Now this is not going to be a basic panel, it's going to be a grid. And instead of having HTML there, what I'm gonna add are columns. That's an array, and we can specify everything that we need for each column. So I'm gonna specify the title. I have to give it a data index to connect to the backend, and I have to give it a width or a flex value. Apart from that, I can add a lot more options that we will be talking about later on. But for now, let's add just a few columns just to get it ready and for the next session. So let's say name and date. I'm gonna say name, it's a flex value, and date it's also width. Since this is going to be, as its name states, a date, I can actually use an X type and say column date. Sorry, date column. And so it will look something like this. Remember that we already have some options pre-created for us. If I wanted to, I could create a B bar where I will put some pages and a T bar where I will put some actions. Remember that if we use a toolbar, we can add this special character that will send every single object after that arrow to the right and every single object before it to the left. So for example, I could have created here a button that refreshes the window, basically just with some basic options. And on the right, I can have a different button with options. For example, something like this. And let's have another one that says delete. And if we take a look at it, we have the admin tasks with a refresh button and a split menu with options there. We'll learn how to personalize those later. I don't have pages just yet. Let's add those, which I will do just by putting an X type with paging toolbar right on the B bar. If we check that out, you can see that we already have those buttons to navigate and even refresh our toolbar and even refresh our grid. So that's what we're doing right now. I think it's quite simple to do. I hope you enjoyed this session. And on the next one, like I said before, we're gonna learn how to create that login panel and switch between the login panel and the actual contents of our application. And we're gonna keep on building more around it. Of course, we need to create the main part, which is our main grid. Of course, we need to create also a main menu option that allows us to exit the application, meaning logout. So we're gonna be doing all of that on the next session. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we have reached the ending of today's webinar. As usual, we're having a quick Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them in our panel here in GoToWebinar. I'll do my best to answer them. Once again, also, if you have any request of something you want me to include into the time tracker or these sessions, put them there I will make my best to include them in the following sessions. So I have Kobe here asking us where he can see a recording of this session. Usually takes us about 2 or 3 days. We will put these sessions on YouTube later, so you can rewatch there. Uh, but of course, it's not gonna be with this live part. Without, it's not gonna have this Q&A. Also, sorry. Also, I have another question here. John is asking me if this is the only way to create the application's navigation. No, it is not the only way. I'm using a tab panel for simplicity's sake, but I usually do, what I do is I create a tree, and I use that tree to create the navigation. Let me see if I can show you something from our kitchen sink. So let me, give me a second. You should be seeing in our screen in a few seconds. Usually use this kind of tree, and I use that for navigation, something like this. Okay, but right now I want to keep it simple. We are using the most basic type of navigation, which is basically a tab panel. So I'm doing something like this. On the next session, like I said, I'm gonna be creating the login window, but I'm gonna also be adding a few options. So as you can see, this example on the tree list, it has options here on the top. So that's where I'm gonna put my profile and my logout option. So yeah, so that's gonna be next week, and this is how I usually do navigation. And one cool thing about doing it this way is that I can have a hash over here to keep my session, sorry, my section open. But anyways, that's just as a side note from John's question. Then I have, let me see which one. Okay, I have James here. He's asking me where can he get ReExt and if there's an npm package. We went through that on our first session, but yeah, uh, there's an npm package. However, I invite you to go into our site, our Sencha site. Just go into Get Started React, and sorry, that's there. You can get an example. I clicked on the wrong link. Sorry. Here you can get an example, and you can look at a grid running with ReExt. But you should go to Products, ReExt, and from here you can try the React grid. So you're gonna get a, once again, sorry, my mistake. That's only try. You should click on Get Started, and from here, if you fill out this form, you will be able to download ReExt. If you follow what I did on the first session, what I'm doing actually, it's just using npm. So either way works, but this is one of the ways to get it. Um, Also, I remind you, you do need XJS. You can use the trial license, or you can use a commercial license. If you are a current developer using XJS, you can use either one. You can just download from the support portal your license. Sorry, your SDK. And what else? Let's see. Okay, somebody else is asking me if there is some kind of visual tool to create an application. I'm guessing they're asking because we have Sencha Architect to create XJS applications. We don't have something like Sencha Architect for ReExt. However, we have a small tool that you can integrate into Microsoft Code to create your project. I will talk about that one in a couple of sessions later. So just stay tuned for that. It's something simple. It's not something that complex as Architect or RapidXJS. Let's see. And okay, once again, I'm being asked where I mean, sorry, I was reading the wrong question. Will you go in depth with the components? Once again, like I said on the previous session, I will go in depth whenever I can. XJS and ReExt, it's quite a big framework, so I cannot go in depth and check every single component and check every single option. Your best course of action there is to go to our kitchen sink and our documentation. And from there, you will be able to see all our options and parameters. So you go into docs, you can check XJS, and from here, you will be able to find anything you need, either in the modern or the classic toolkit. So for example, if I click on date column, I will get to see an example at the beginning. I can actually run it since this is a Sencha field. And I get to see all the different properties and methods that this object has. So this is for XJS, but like I have explained before, ReExt is a wrapper around XJS. So with what you're learning in these sessions, you should be able to put this inside ReExt. We do have some content here for ReExt, but this is just basically how to get started. And here again, it's the kitchen sink where you can look at examples. So let's say you wanted to look at that tab panel I was talking about today. You can go here, and here it is a site navigation. Okay, we will actually make more changes to make it look something similar to this, but that's once we get to use Sencha Themer in a few sessions from now. Okay, are there any more questions? If you guys have any more questions, please leave them in the panel. If not, something I can tell you right now also is that we are right now having a new ReExt version. It was just released yesterday. It actually allows to do things a little bit more simple than before. So if we look at that code that I was showing you before, the navigation one, remember that I used to have this on tab change? This was required for the previous version. Right now, this has been taken out, so you can actually just create your navigation straight like this. So it's taking 3 lines out. So ReExt is continuously being built on. So it's our newest tool for XJS and React. So you're gonna be seeing more and more options as days go by. So I guess that's it for now. I appreciate everybody being here today. If you have more questions, if you have requests, once again, I remind you, leave it here in the panel or send me an email, and I will make sure to include that in the following sessions. Once again, thank you, and I'll see you next week on the following session. Thank you, everybody.